Zara stood at the center of the training arena, her arms crossed, a smug smile on her face. The bright lights above cast a sharp glow on her smooth, dark skin, and her sharp golden eyes gleamed with confidence. She was an elite warrior, born for speed, trained for battle. No one had ever caught her, not even the strongest fighters in the galaxy. Across from her, Captain Ryan stood tall, his expression calm. His uniform was plain, nothing special, but his eyes held something that made Zora pause for a second. Not fear, not doubt, something else. The arena was filled with different species, all gathered to watch the challenge. Some cheered for Zora, others whispered about the human. The challenge was simple. Zora would run, and Ryan had to catch her. If he failed, he would have to admit that humans were weak. If he won, Zora would have to respect human strength. It was a game, but the tension in the air made it feel like something much bigger. Zora laughed, stretching her arms as she looked at Ryan. "You really think you can catch me, human?" Her voice was playful, but carried a sharp edge. "No one has ever come close." Ryan tilted his head slightly. "We'll see." His tone was steady, unshaken. The signal was given. Zara took off, vanishing in an instant. The crowd gasped. She moved like a blur, her body a streak of silver and gold as she dashed through the arena. Ryan started running after her, but compared to her, he looked almost slow. Some aliens in the crowd had laughed. It was a joke. This human was wasting his time. Zara darted across the ground, her feet barely touching the surface. She turned sharply, glancing over her shoulder. Ryan was still running, but he was far behind. She grinned. Too easy. She picked up her speed, twisting and turning through the large space, making sure he had no chance of getting close. She slowed down slightly, looking back again. Ryan was still running in the same direction, steady, focused. Something about his movement made her curious. He wasn't chasing blindly. He wasn't wasting energy. He was watching her, studying her. Zara frowned but quickly shook off the thought. It didn't matter. She was too fast, too skilled. No human could keep up. She moved even faster, zigzagging unpredictably. But Ryan still didn't look frustrated. He just kept running, kept closing the distance bit by bit. Minutes passed, and for the first time, Zara felt something strange, uncertainty. She had run in so many battles, so many games, but never had someone kept up this long. Even though she was faster, Ryan was still there, still moving, still refusing to give up. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were watching closely, whispering, noticing the same thing she did. Ryan wasn't just running. He was hunting. Zara pushed herself harder, her muscles burning. She wasn't going to let a human beat her. She sped toward a narrow passage at the edge of the arena, thinking she could use the small space to escape even easier. But right before she entered, Ryan made his move. He lunged forward, not at her directly, but at the space she was about to step into. In a blink, his arms locked around her leg. Before she could react, she was pulled down with surprising force. She twisted, trying to escape, but it was too late. The impact sent a shock through her body. She hit the ground, rolling, but Ryan didn't let go. His grip was unbreakable, solid like steel. She struggled, twisting, kicking, but his hold tightened. For the first time in her life, she was trapped. The crowd gasped. No one had ever seen Zara caught like this. She looked up, breathing hard, her golden eyes wide. Ryan stared back at her, his grip firm but controlled. "Speed isn't everything," he said, his voice calm. Zara opened her mouth, then closed it. Her heart pounded. How had he done that? For the first time, she wasn't laughing. Zara gritted her teeth, her body twisting violently as she tried to free herself from Ryan's grip. But no matter how hard she struggled, his hold didn't loosen. It was like being caught in an iron trap. No escape, no weakness. She had underestimated him. And now, for the first time, she was the one stuck. The crowd, once full of laughter and mocking whispers, was now silent. They had never seen Zara in this position before. Ryan's breathing was steady, his grip calculated. He wasn't just holding her down with brute force. He was using technique, leverage, and timing. He had predicted her movements, waited for the right moment, and struck with perfect precision. Zara realized this wasn't just luck. It was skill. Zara's pride flared. She wasn't going to accept defeat so easily. With a sharp breath, she gathered all her strength and pushed against the ground, twisting her body to break free. But Ryan adjusted immediately, shifting his position just enough to keep her locked in place. It was infuriating. No one had ever done this to her before. "You're fast," Ryan said, his voice calm but firm. "But speed without control is just wasted energy." Zora's eyes narrowed, and humans are supposed to be weak. She twisted again, trying to slip her leg out of his hold, but he countered effortlessly. "That's what you believed," Ryan said simply. Zora growled in frustration. She had always thought of humans as slower, weaker beings, warriors who relied on tools and machines because they couldn't match the strength or speed of other species. But now, caught in Ryan's grip, she felt something she had never expected. Respect. She hated it, but she couldn't deny it. He had outsmarted her. He had watched, learned, waited, and struck at the perfect moment. He wasn't just running after her. He had been hunting her from the start. The crowd started murmuring. Some aliens exchanged surprised glances. Others leaned forward, eager to see what would happen next. Was this it? Was Zora, the unbeatable runner, finally defeated? No, she refused to accept that. A slow smirk formed on her lips as an idea sparked in her mind. Ryan was strong, but was he prepared for everything? Zara suddenly stopped struggling, her body going completely still. She let her muscles relax as if giving up. Ryan hesitated, just for a second. And that was all she needed. With a sudden, explosive movement, she twisted her entire body and used the ground for leverage. Her free leg shot up, aiming straight for Ryan's side. It was a risky move, but it was her last chance. Would it work? Or had Ryan already expected this too? Zara's leg shot up like a whip, aiming straight for Ryan's ribs. It was a perfect counterattack. Quick, powerful, and completely unexpected. The crowd gasped, expecting the human to lose his hold, to finally make a mistake. But Ryan was already prepared. Instead of panicking, he shifted his weight at the last second, moving just enough to avoid the full impact of her kick. Her foot still connected, but it didn't land where she wanted. Instead of breaking free, she only managed to push him slightly off balance. That was her mistake. Ryan reacted instantly, using the momentum of her own move against her. Before Zara could pull her leg back, he adjusted his grip, twisting his body and pulling her into an even tighter lock. This time, there was no room for escape. She was completely trapped. Zara's breath hitched. This wasn't possible. No one had ever been able to control her movements like this. She tried to kick again, but it was useless. Every time she moved, Ryan adjusted, countering her effortlessly. It felt like fighting against an unbreakable force. Ryan's voice was steady, calm. "You rely too much on speed," he said. "But speed means nothing if your enemy is always one step ahead." Zara's eyes burned with frustration. She had never felt this powerless before. She had trained her whole life, built her reputation as the fastest warrior. Yet here she was, completely trapped by a human. The crowd was no longer laughing. The silence was heavy, filled with disbelief. Zara clenched her fists. She refused to lose. With one last burst of strength, she tried to break free again. But this time, even she knew it was pointless. Ryan had her completely under control. Her breathing was ragged, her muscles tense. Then, for the first time, she stopped fighting. She lay still, staring up at Ryan with a mix of frustration and something else. Something she hadn't felt before. Respect. Ryan met her gaze, his grip still firm, but not cruel. He wasn't mocking her. He wasn't gloating. He had simply won. The realization hit her like a shockwave. She had lost. And yet, for some reason, she found herself smiling. "You said." Zara lay still for a moment, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The fight had drained her, but it wasn't exhaustion that made her stop struggling. It was understanding. She had never been caught before, never been outmatched, never felt this kind of control pinning her down. The crowd was frozen, watching in silence. They had expected an easy win for Zara, a quick race where she humiliated the human. But now they saw something none of them had ever imagined. A human warrior outmaneuvering one of the fastest fighters in the galaxy. Ryan didn't tighten his grip any further, but he didn't release her either. He was waiting, watching. His expression wasn't arrogant. He didn't laugh at her, didn't gloat. That made Zara even more frustrated. If he had mocked her, she could have fought harder. If he had insulted her, she could have ignored the lesson. But he just stared, calm and steady, like he had expected this outcome from the very beginning. She gritted her teeth. "Let me go." Ryan held her for a few more seconds, as if deciding whether she was bluffing. Then, without a word, he released her leg and stepped back. Zara rolled away, pushing herself up with a quick, fluid motion. The moment she was on her feet, she considered attacking again. Maybe this time, she could catch him off guard. Maybe she could regain control. But she didn't move. Something inside her had shifted. She looked at Ryan differently now, not as a weak human, not as an opponent she could easily outrun, but as something else. Someone else, someone who had studied her, understood her, and beaten her without needing to be stronger or faster. Ryan stretched his arms slightly, rolling his shoulders as if nothing had happened. "You were never going to win that way," he said simply. Zara narrowed her eyes. "And why is that?" Ryan tilted his head. "Because you think speed is everything." Zara's fists clenched. "Speed is everything. No one has ever caught me before." Ryan took a slow step closer, his gaze steady. "No one ever studied you before." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had always relied on her speed, knowing that no one could match her. But Ryan hadn't needed to match her. He had just needed to predict her. And that was exactly what he did. The realization left a bitter taste in her mouth. But along with the bitterness, something else grew inside her: curiosity. The crowd, still stunned, began to murmur. Some whispered in disbelief. Others looked at Zara, waiting to see what she would do next. Zara took a deep breath, then let it out slowly. She wasn't used to losing. But this was different. She studied Ryan for a long moment, then, to everyone's shock, she let out a short laugh. "Maybe humans aren't as weak as I thought." Ryan smirked slightly. "Maybe you're not as untouchable as you thought." Zara's golden eyes flashed with something new. Not anger, not frustration, but something close to admiration. She wasn't sure yet whether she liked this feeling. But one thing was certain. This fight wasn't over. "You said." Zara took a step back, rolling her shoulders as if shaking off the loss. But deep inside, something about this defeat stayed with her. She had never lost like this before. Not by brute force. Not by sheer power. But by intelligence. By patience. By someone who had seen through her confidence and found the weak spots she never thought existed. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Warriors from different species whispered among themselves, exchanging surprised glances. No one had expected this outcome. A few days ago, if someone had told them a human would catch Zara, they would have laughed. But now, after watching it happen with their own eyes, they weren't laughing anymore. Zara glanced at Ryan again, this time studying him with more interest. He wasn't the strongest fighter in the arena. He wasn't the fastest, and yet he had done what no one else could. Ryan, on the other hand, looked completely calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. He stretched his arms and adjusted his stance, like this was just another training session. That annoyed Zara more than anything. He wasn't acting like someone who had won a great victory. He wasn't celebrating or showing off. To him, this was normal. Zara's pride still burned, but so did her curiosity. "You knew you could catch me," she said, her voice quieter now. "Didn't you?" Ryan nodded. "Yes." She raised an eyebrow. "Even before we started." Ryan smirked slightly. "I had a plan." The simplicity of his answer made her frown. There was no arrogance in his tone, no need to explain himself. He had just known. She wasn't used to that. Zara crossed her arms. "You think you're smarter than me." Ryan shook his head. "No, but I knew you would run the same way you always do. You trust your speed too much. And that makes you predictable." The words hit harder than she expected. Predictable. She had spent her whole life outrunning enemies, proving she was untouchable. And yet, in this one challenge, Ryan had turned that strength into her weakness. She exhaled sharply. "Fine," she muttered. "You won this round." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "This round?" A small smirk played on her lips. "I never lose twice." Ryan chuckled. "Then maybe we should do this again sometime." Zora's golden eyes gleamed. There was no way she would let this go. She would learn. She would adapt. And next time, she would be ready. The crowd, sensing the tension shifting, watched closely. This wasn't just a competition anymore. This was something more. A rivalry had been born. "You said." The tension in the arena slowly faded, replaced by a different kind of energy. Something unspoken but powerful. The challenge was over, but everyone watching could feel it. This wasn't the end. Zara took another deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Her instincts screamed at her to challenge Ryan again, to prove that she wasn't predictable, that she could outthink him just as easily as he had outthought her. But something held her back. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even frustration anymore. It was something she wasn't used to feeling. Respect. She hated it, but she couldn't deny it. Ryan had won, not because he was stronger, not because he was faster, but because he was patient. He had watched her, studied her, and waited for the perfect moment. He had played the long game. And that was something she had never considered before. Ryan, meanwhile, remained relaxed, his breathing steady, his posture casual. He wasn't acting like a man who had just won a great victory. He wasn't celebrating or rubbing it in. He was simply waiting. For what? Zara narrowed her eyes. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. Ryan tilted his head slightly. "Neither are you." She let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "I should be angry." Ryan smirked. "Are you?" Zara thought about it. A part of her still burned from losing, but another part, one she didn't fully understand yet, felt something different. She had spent years proving she was the fastest, outrunning everyone who dared to chase her. But today, someone had caught her. And instead of feeling humiliated, she felt challenged. That was new. She took a step forward, her golden eyes locked onto his. "You think this is over?" Ryan crossed his arms. "I think you're already planning how to beat me next time." She smirked. Smart human. Ryan chuckled. Fast alien. The crowd, sensing the shift in mood, started murmuring again. Some warriors exchanged glances, while others whispered about what this meant. Was Zara admitting defeat, or was this something else? Then, to everyone's surprise, Zara extended her hand. "We'll race again," she said. "And next time, I won't be predictable." Ryan didn't hesitate. He took her hand, shaking it firmly. "Next time, I'll be ready." The moment their hands met, something changed. This wasn't just a rivalry anymore. It was something deeper, a silent understanding. A promise. Zara wasn't done, and Ryan wasn't backing down. This was just the beginning. "You said." The arena slowly emptied as the spectators left, still murmuring about what they had just witnessed. Some were shocked, others excited, but all of them knew one thing. This challenge had changed something. Zara. The undefeated runner had been caught, and not by brute strength or technology, but by pure strategy. It was a lesson no one would forget. Zara and Ryan remained in the center of the arena, neither one moving, neither one looking away. The challenge was over, but the real battle had just begun. The battle of the mind, the battle of what came next. Zara crossed her arms, her smirk returning. "You should know something, Ryan." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I don't like losing." Her golden eyes gleamed with determination. "And I never lose twice." Ryan chuckled. "Good. Then the next round will be even more interesting." Zara tilted her head, studying him again. He wasn't like the other warriors she had faced. He didn't fight with ego. He didn't rely on power alone. He was a hunter, a strategist, someone who saw beyond the surface. She had never met a human like him before. And that made him dangerous. She liked that. Without another word, Zara turned and walked away, her movements fluid, confident. She wasn't running this time. She wasn't trying to escape. She was planning, calculating, preparing. Ryan watched her go, a knowing smirk on his face. He could already tell this wasn't the last time they would face each other. And next time, she wouldn't make the same mistakes. Good, he thought, because neither would he. As Zara disappeared into the shadows, Ryan exhaled slowly. He had caught her once, but the real question wasn't whether he could do it again. It was whether she would let him.